each food is different. What I will say is that generally from the 6 to 9 month old range, you want the size about the size of 2 fingers. And it has very little to do with choking and more about that grabbing motion I taught you.
Hey guys, since you're tuning in to Mom Talks with Krista, this is part 2 of my interview with Jenny Best from Solid Starts. If you missed part 1, I highly recommend you go back and watch that one first. It's all about baby-led weaning. So today we're talking more about safety as it comes to baby-led weaning. So how to prepare foods based on their ages and how to deal with allergens. I know that's a huge question that moms have when it comes to baby-led weaning. And finally, we're going to go into Solid Starts as a company and what they can do for you, plus learn about their free database that they have that you can use today. So without further ado, here's part 2 of my interview.
And you kind of mentioned earlier a good sign that they're ready to get started was that they can sit up on their own, because it can be dangerous, if they're falling a lot. So what are some other things to look for keeping a safe environment while they're starting to eat on their own?
Well, and I want to preface this by saying that studies are showing that baby-led weaning, so starting with finger foods or real food, has no increased risk of choking versus purees. And actually, we have 2 expert feeding therapists on our team who study the neurobiology of swallowing. They're really good. Pediatricians don't study this stuff, but occupational therapists can, depending on what their focus is. And our feeding therapists, what they will tell you is that they're not worried whatsoever the baby who started with baby-led weaning, because their oral development tends to be further along than a spoon-fed baby. They're worried about the 9-month-old baby who was spoon-fed and sort of missed the window of that early oral development and is now being fed finger foods because it's time, but they don't know how to necessarily move that food around in their mouth. So I just wanted to say that, because I think probably the number one, fear, I would imagine it was for me when I started it, was just a fear of choking and the gagging and all of that. It's really distressing to watch and to worry about. So I like to get that out there and make sure that folks know that actually, if you're looking at this from an oral development perspective, from a swallowing specialist perspective, your baby is likely, and your toddler is less likely to choke when they're running around at that second birthday party of a cousin's and grabbing a cherry tomato off the buffet plate while you're not looking. That toddler is less likely to choke if they've had some of the challenging foods early on, even towards 6 months old. So that said, in terms of a safe environment, the number one most important thing is you. Okay. I think we're tired. We've got lots of things to do. We often kind of think of the high chair as like, they're contained, they're buckled in, they're safe. I can go do things now, right? Really, we want you at arm's reach from your baby. And I know a lot of moms won't even use the harnesses on their high chairs in the first month as their confidence builds and grows, just so that they could take their baby out and do the back blows immediately if they needed to, because it comes down to minutes when you are dealing with choking. You have 4 minutes is like the maximum, right? Before things get really bad. So you being there and making sure that your caregiver can be there and is not, taking the other toddler to the potty or whatever it is else going on in your life, that meal time needs to be at a place when you can sit down with your child. And there are so many benefits to doing that as well, from a relationship with the food and the kind of relationship your child's going to develop with eating, if mommy or daddy or the caregiver or grandma, whoever is eating with you. So not only from a safety perspective, it's hugely beneficial from a preventing picky eating perspective as well. The other thing is just making sure you have an upright high chair. There are so many bad high chairs out there that I don't even know how they are legally on the market. You should have a completely upright chair. There should be absolutely no reclining at all, okay? Because the babies don't have a ton of oral experience to be moving food around. If they are already leaning back, you're really setting yourself up for a lot of gagging and possibly choking. So a really upright chair. We don't do product sponsorships or affiliations, but I will say that the Trip Trap chair by Stoka and the Nomi High chair are near perfect in terms of design from a placement perspective. And of course, you can use them for years and years to come. So proper high chair, making sure the caregiver is always within an arm's reach of the child. And then the last thing is really just creating a calm environment. Babies can aspirate food, inhale it, if they are startled. So, if you've got sudden noises on the television or whatever chaos is going on in your home, especially in the 6 to 9 month age range when they're just starting out, this is so new, trying to create, even make mealtime at a time that wouldn't normally be mealtime, if it if it's what you need to do to make it quiet and peaceful and calm. And then a little sort of tip I'll throw in there that has nothing to do with safety, but get the dog out of the house, because babies love feeding animals and dogs, and it can turn into this very codependent relationship that is near impossible to break. So
Definitely seen that before. So we do kind of mention, like obviously choking can happen, different situations. So I know you make a few posts about this too as well. So for new parents watching, what are some of the best like CPR resources that you would recommend them checking out?
Yeah, and I've got a list in my head, Krista, but truthfully, I really can't tell you anything other than Red Cross, because it is the gold standard. It is, those courses, and there are a number of them. There's online, there's in person, but you can absolutely start virtual right now for obvious reasons. That is the gold standard and the most widely respected in the medical community. So absolutely go there first. That said, there are a number of private companies who are actually constantly emailing me, but there are a number of them who I'm sure are doing fantastic work with seasoned professionals, but I don't quite feel comfortable endorsing anyone who's not 100% legit approved. So I would just go to the Red Cross website and find the nearest class near you, or the online version in the meantime. It's really worth knowing what to do. To do a baby Heimlich, if you will. It's not a Heimlich move, but we call it that in terms of the emergency procedure. It's actually not hard at all. And so once you kind of go through that, it's basically a series of back blows and chest thumps. And, of course, if there's a little child, that's like, your hands are big, is this kind of a scary thing. But once you do that training and you really know it, I find the fear around all of this, whether it's purees or finger food, really reduces. It's like, okay, I know what to do. It's the moms who have not taken any class or watched any video online. And there's a lot of free YouTube videos too that, folks can find. I'm sure Red Cross probably has a few out there. But once you do that, your level of confidence will grow, because worst case scenario, you at least know what to do. And those moves are very effective at, rescuing babies. So it's almost, I want to say it's almost more important than the high chair, than the whatever, is to know what to do if that happens.
Just being prepared. You just got to be prepared. Yeah, definitely. So kind of keeping on the safety track here, what is the safest way to prepare these foods for babies?
This is why I created my organization, Solid Starts, because when I was totally sold on baby-led weaning, this is the way I'm going to do it. My firstborn was an incredibly picky eater. I feel like I made all the common mistakes now that I can trace it back. And so I was really convinced that baby-led weaning was the way I wanted to feed my twins. But when it came down to the food, there were 2 6-month-olds sitting in front of me and a piece of steak, I was like, seriously? I don't know how to cut this. Are you kidding? And I was really afraid. And so I would be spending all night on the internet, how to cut this, how to cut that. And was it different for a 7-month-old versus an 18-month-old? And really kind of going around the bend on this. And it turns out there's not a lot of information out there about that, which is why we created our First Foods database that has instructions for each food, and it'll have 1,000 foods when we're done, completely culturally comprehensive and inclusive, from how to cut a sea cucumber to a sea urchin to, steak or whatever. So, I can't say each food is different. What I will say is that generally from the 6 to 9 month old range, you want the size about the size of 2 fingers. And it has very little to do with choking and more about that grabbing motion I taught you. Is how a baby's going to grab it. If you offer it in the air, like say, this is the food, they're going to come kind of swipe at it. And, so it's really just to facilitate the eating. But it turns out, and this is sort of this really, it's not intuitive, it turns out that bigger is safer at 6 months old. We all think, oh, their airways are, so tiny, and so everything has to be so tiny. But the reality is, in my experience, and the experience on our team, which includes, pediatricians and feeding therapists, is that young babies, particularly the 6 month olds, they are more likely to struggle or gag or choke on a green pea. Or a corn kernel or rice than they are a gigantic rib, mango pit, corn on the cob, those like big long sticks of food. So not only are those like big long sticks of food that size easier for the babies to grab and to self-feed and to kind of munch on, it's actually safer. They're not going, they don't have the ability to make tiny bites and tears at that age. They may take off a huge hunk. Which is scary, especially if you're not used to it. But that big hunk of food actually is even too big to get back near the problem area, right? So it's actually the really small, round, hard pieces of food, like pomegranate arils, I worry about. Tiny, hard blueberries, I worry about. Those like perfectly round, kind of firm, maybe even a little slippery, like a melon ball is about the worst thing you could do. So, you want, when it comes to food safety, you want to kind of start big and then move smaller as your child gets older, and they'll develop this pincer-grasp where they can then pick up smaller pieces of food. A baby's airway is about the size, a tiny, tiny bit smaller than a drinking straw. So, and for something to get stuck in there, either has to form a plug over the top of that straw. This is why peanut butter, or like a glob of peanut butter, would be a risk. It has to get stuck in that straw, so sort of swallowed halfway or inhaled halfway, and stuck in the middle of a drinking straw. So those are the two things. So, when you think about the kinds of foods that actually have that capability, it's not these bigger pieces of food. It's like a small chunk of meat, or a green pea, as I said, or a corn kernel. These are the things, popcorn, stuff like that. So, start big, move smaller as your baby gets older. And then around 18 months, this beautiful thing happens where they are able to bite small pieces efficiently, to tear, and then chew and process. And so I actually then go back up in size. So I go big to super small to big again. So for example, if we took a pancake, for a 6 month old, you're going to cut a rectangular strip about the size of 2 adult fingers together. At 9 months, you're going to offer tiny little, squares or whatever shape pieces you want, but, about that size. And then as your child gets older and is starting to tear, you can go back up to either this piece or honestly, even the whole pancake. An amazing on-the-go snack, super clean. Leftover pancakes are like my favorite snack ever.
That's the best. Love it. And I know a lot of concerns that parents have are about allergies and different allergens that can come up and how it's going to affect their child. So what are the best ways to introduce those kinds of foods to babies as well?
And we have a pediatric allergist who's an award-winning author on our team, Sakina, and she's fantastic. And I am an allergy mom as well. My firstborn, Charlie, the picky eater, also has life-threatening allergies. So I feel like I've lived all these fears that moms have right now. And it is scary. I've done the EpiPen 3 times. I've been to the emergency room 7 times with my son with allergic reactions. So I have lived that. So it was really important to me to bring on a pediatric allergist to Solid Starts, because I wanted to come at it from a comprehensive way and not just the predictable way is mostly it's a nutritionist or a dietitian out there, right? But that's not really all that matters. We're talking about swallowing safety. We're talking about allergies in a time when allergies are increasing in the pediatric population. So when it comes down to allergens, it's a really interesting kind of shift. It's a bit of a pendulum swing happening. So 15 years ago, if you and I were moms and we were talking to our pediatrician, the doctor would have said, avoid allergens until around age 3 entirely. No nuts, no peanut, right? No soy, and no shellfish, none of that. And what happened during that time is allergies increased 81% in children. 81%. And I think it was over the course of a decade. So the medical community realized they had it, well, they think they've had it backwards. So now, thanks to a groundbreaking study funded by FARE, FARE.org, maybe it's foodallergy.org, I think now, they did a study on peanut allergy prevention. It's one of the only studies out there that is on prevention of allergies using the early introduction of the food allergen to prevent that allergy. And what they found is that if you introduced peanut early and often to an infant at high risk of peanut allergies. So babies who are likely to have allergies, that means they probably have eczema, they might have some sort of rhinitis or hay fever. These are kind of indicators for a child who might have an allergy later on. If you introduce peanuts early on and often, it was going to could prevent the allergy from developing at all, and this is a long-term study, by 83%. Huge. So then the community is like, okay, we're doing allergens early and often. Now, what we don't know is whether that applies to all allergens or is it just peanuts? There's a lot we don't know out there. We do know that the shellfish allergy, I think it's like 40 to 50% develop later in life. So our allergist is not convinced that an early introduction of shellfish is really worth it. But if it's in your culture, go for it. There's no need to hold off. I think the bottom line when it comes to allergies is that there's no need to hold off anymore, and that there may be some benefit to all the other allergens. I would say particularly the nuts, the tree nuts and legumes like peanut and soy, that the early exposure may actually prevent that allergy from developing. So how do you do it? You're afraid your child might have an allergic reaction. They can't communicate to you yet. You could see the symptoms of like swelling or itching or wheezing. Those are the kinds of symptoms you might see. I just like to say, you know what? Start small. A scant amount, mixed in with some other food your child has already had. Even a lick of a peanut butter off your finger would be okay. Start really, really small, even less than a quarter teaspoon, and then work your way up. The national recommendations for introducing peanut are actually really aggressive, and it's all in one day. It's like you start with, a small bit, and it's like a teaspoon, and 2 teaspoons is like a really like aggressive. For me, in a COVID environment, if I were a new mom, I'd be like, yeah, no, that is not happening in my house because I'm not going to the emergency room today or like in the next 6 months. So we have on our site, if moms feel like they need a handheld approach, a guide to introducing allergens. It's a PDF download written by our allergist and myself. It has these like choose your own adventure kind of schedules, like, go whole hog and tear the Band-Aid off approach. And here's a suggested amount of measurements of that allergen that you could introduce versus like slow and steady is the way to go. So you can kind of match it to your personality. There's no perfect way to do it, but I would just say try not to let your fear get in the way of starting to introduce it, because my worry is that all these babes in COVID time aren't going to get introduced to it, and the allergies are going to swing up again after this year because the parents were too afraid to try it at home. So obviously, if there's a history of allergies in your family, like talk to a doctor before doing this at home.
So now that we've kind of like broken down everything Solid Starts does, tell us more about Solid Starts and what you guys do for families.
Solid Starts was built out of necessity. I was up at like 2 a.m. with 6-month-old twins, trying to figure out how to feed them real food. And all the resources I came across were either locked behind a paywall, take this course for 60 some odd dollars. And I'm like, it's 2 a.m. I've got twins. Like, there's no course happening in my life right now. Or buy this whole book and read this thing, or, give me your email and then I'll send you some information. And I found that really frustrating. And, from a number of reasons, from both accessibility and sort of a social justice perspective, I wanted to make a resource that was free and free forever. So we obviously have everything you need to know on our website about starting solids, including other methods. We kind of compare the methods side by side if you're not sure finger foods are the way to go. But the sort of crown jewel of the site is this First Foods database, which will eventually house every ingredient under the sun. So we have about 200 foods in the pipeline. I think 130 are on the website right now. Many are on my desktop staring at me like, edit me. And eventually we will have 1,000 foods. And each food page, you land on it, you see videos of different aged babies from a 6-month-old to an 18-month-old eating that food. So you can really see, okay, this is possible. This baby is doing it and she's crushing it. Probably literally. So we have videos, and then the very self-guided Q&A format, all the questions you have. Is it a choking hazard? How do I cut it for a 6-month-old? How do I cut it for an 18-month-old? Is it an allergen? All those questions are answered, and then you have the videos and a recipe at the bottom. So each food has its own little page and universe, and I'm hoping we can turn it into an app sometime next year. So the whole thing is free. It'll be free forever. And it's my everything now. I never really dreamed of being an entrepreneur or building something, an asset like this that, might be an app. That would never have crossed my mind. I just happened to kind of identify a huge need at the right time. Turns out a lot of moms need this information because our growth has been crazy through complete word of mouth just in the first couple of months of soft launching. I was like, I'm just gonna put this up on Instagram and see how it goes. I'm looking at it now and we're nearing 50,000. It's wow, this is nuts. Yeah. But it shows you just how much people were craving that information.
I feel like a lot of these brands, that are geared towards, babies and growth and development, it's a mom that was, in that moment was like, wait, there could be something that, would be easier or more helpful. So I know when you connected with me and I was looking, I was like, this is awesome, because we get questions about, weaning all the time. So it's perfect for, this audience where a lot of them are breastfeeding. And so then they can kind of go into that as their next stage.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I know you were saying you have, another, database and a special that you wanted to offer Mommy Knows Best followers.
Yes. So we made a discount code for you all. And, so the database is free. You can look up any food there and find what you need to know. So if you're on a budget, definitely go over there. And we actually have a ton of information on introducing allergens for free as well. You really almost don't even need this code, but I shouldn't even be saying that. But we do have guides for the mom who has no time, who's like, I can't put all the pieces together. I just need this now. I need it right away, and I need you to tell me what to do. So we have guides. We are giving you guys 15% off with the code Mommy Knows. So Mommy Knows, and you'll get 15% off any of our guides there on our website, solidstarts.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. That'll be awesome. I can't wait to share it with our group and our followers, because like I said, this is such a popular question we get. So now I can tag you guys in and when we get questions for it. So that will be awesome. So awesome. This is really informational. Learned a lot here. So thank you for sharing that with us.
All right, guys, that was part 2 of my interview with Jenny Best from Solid Starts. I hope all your questions about baby-led weaning were answered and that you feel more comfortable going into it now. But in the meantime, definitely check out @SolidStarts on Instagram. She's got amazing videos and tips and tricks, and then definitely check out her database as well. The link is below, and it was just an awesome episode. I learned a ton, so thank you, Jenny, for coming on. Check out Solid Starts, guys, and I'll see you next week for a new interview.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Mom Talks with Krista. If you're not yet subscribed, go ahead and click on the subscribe button. It should be down here somewhere. We release new episodes every single Wednesday, and if you're not following us yet, be sure to follow us at Mommy Knows Best on Instagram. And remember, if you're watching this and doubting yourself, you are a great mom. So thanks so much for watching, and we will see you next week.